good. Well, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank David very much, because a lot of what he's explained, a lot of the things that will help in this particular presentation. So I'm looking at the professionalism rubric that is an institutional rubric. I want to just briefly go over assessment, and David was very good at doing the two assessments, which I think are important, but I'd just like to add another one. I'd also then just like to look at social work and professionalism, because our standards in social work are determined internationally as well as at the national level. And then I'll look at the different kinds of professional learning experiences that we have in the social work program here at USP, and go over the learning support that we give our students, as well then as going through the application of the rubric, which David has done so well. Now, I would like to, in addition to summative assessment and formative assessment, particularly for the professional rubric, I would like to add this assessment called sustainable assessment. So we were introduced to this by David Bowd at our evaluation and assessment workshop that was held in April of this year. Now, sustainable assessment is quite important, because it's when the graduate themselves is able to do a self-assessment, and when they're in the workplace to be able to assess their work to a high standard, as well as to be able to assist other people in their colleagues in the work situation. So I feel from a professional point of view that we have to build up this assessment. I constantly see documents by government and the Fiji Civil Service, etc., that have no footnotes, that have no references, that have no dates, and they're not well researched, and oftentimes they'll be plagiarized, etc. I've also had colleagues who have worked in the public service in various countries, and they have said they have put references and footnotes into reports that they have given, and their colleagues have sort of laughed at them and said, "What are you trying to do, be an academic? We don't do that in the public service." So I think we have to, in terms of professionalism, we really have to get this assessment up to scratch, and making sure that through the workplace, our graduates are able to do their own self-assessment as well as assess others. The other thing I wanted to mention about assessment, particularly formative or learning assessment, is that has to be done very early in the semester and in the course. Students should be receiving as much feedback as possible on their learning and improvement of their learning very early in the course, not leaving it to the final examination. Because the final examination grade really doesn't give students any learning feedback. All it provides them with is a grade, and sometimes they're interested in what they did in the exam and how they got that grade, but very often they're not. From a social work perspective, we have two organizations at the international level. That's the International Association of the Schools of Social Work and the International Federation of Social Workers. These organizations provide professional standards as well as standards for education at the international level. All of the schools of social work, including us at USP, are affiliated or members of the International Association of Schools of Social Work. And so in subscribing and being a member of that association, we are subscribing and being a part of the international standards. When it comes then to a national level, we find that there are national levels of association of social workers, and they set the professional standards at the national level, to which, as a school of social work, we must also teach and provide the education that meets those standards. In Fiji, we have the Fiji Association of Social Workers. Unfortunately, it's not a very active organization, but it has provided in the past those standards, and particularly the Professional Code of Ethics. Two of the things that come out of the profession itself are being a critical reflective practitioner, as well then as the Professional Code of Ethics. So that has to be embedded into all of the coursework and teaching that we do here at USP in that profession. And you'll find that, I'm sure, with other professions that are there. So we have to teach, if you like, reflective practice. And we start out very early in the students, in the first year, in the first course that they are ever introduced to, and it's reinforced through every other course in social work, is reflective practice. And praxis, or the integration of theory and practice, is the reflective process is an integral part of learning how broad ideas and specific issues might be connected. That is, learning how to learn. So we emphasize very much that the students must learn how to learn. They have to own their own learning. They have to be able to begin to set their own learning objectives within the framework of a course, and the parameters of a course. But it's up to them to really own their learning. And we try to emphasize that right from the very beginning. In reflective practice then, we work on this loop, which comes from our fieldwork manual, on experiencing. So experiential learning is very important in the professions. So we have to set out, in all of our courses, learning experiences for them and activities. The learning then, the student sits back and reflects on that experience. They begin to say, document what they have actually done. They then need to analyze it in light of theories, in light of other people's opinions on their work, their comments on their work and their professional behavior, and they have to develop an understanding through that analysis. And then they begin to plan what they are going to do for the next experience. So this is in a sense what we call praxis. It comes from Paulo Freire in terms of conscientization. The notion that we are constantly experiencing, we reflect on that, we analyze and understand it, and then we plan for the future. What are we going to do tomorrow? What are we going to do next week? What are we going to do when we meet that client or with that community the next time we are scheduled to be with them? So critical reflective practice is something that we teach and encourage as a professional trait and characteristic that they need to have. And they should be doing that excellently by the time they leave in their third year. We also then have to ensure that students understand the professional code of ethics. The code of ethics is different from ethical reasoning. And within our rubrics, the institutional rubrics, we do have an ethics aspect to it, but that one is focusing on ethical reasoning. How do people make decisions ethically and apply those decisions? The standards, or the professional code of ethics, however, are standards of ethical behavior for social workers in professional relationships with those that they serve, or their clients, the communities, individuals, families they work with, their colleagues, their employers and the organizations that they work with. And an employer can be a community. It doesn't have to be a formal organization, but a community oftentimes gets people together. We then have ethics relationships with other individuals and the professions, as well as the community and society as a whole, and including research. So research is a very professional trait and something that we stress also from the very beginning of a student's career with us, or studying with us. Now, in terms of our professional learning experiences, we have structured at the 100 level, 200 level, and 300 level these kinds of learning experiences the students get involved in. So the very first course in semester 1 is research. They need to identify an organization where they are going to do some volunteer work in. And they are expected to research that organization to try to understand its structure, what's their vision, their mission, etc. What kind of service do they provide, if any, to a community or to individuals. And they have to write a report on that. As well then as they undertake actual volunteer work with the organization. So that begins to introduce them to the professional work environment. In the second semester, they also have to research, but the research is of an organization and is concentrating more on policy, social policy practice, which is another aspect of social work that is one of the specific program on learning outcomes is formulation of policy options. So again, right from the very beginning, if a student starts in a second semester or a first semester, their first year of study is doing research and volunteer work or research and policy practice. The second, the 200 level then, we engage with the community. Rather than organizations, we're getting into the community. We also then, and that's developing a community profile, which is a form of research, but it's getting into working with the community to get a picture at that point in time of that community. We deal with advocacy work as well as with case management in social work. In the second semester then, they actually have a field, professional field placement, where they work intensely with an organization, and they are supervised both within the organization as well as from the university. So they have that professional experience. Now, oftentimes students are not able to finish it in the second semester, and they ask to carry it on into the summer break. And they will finish by February of the following year. The 300 level then, we move a step higher. We begin to look at professional supervision. What is the supervision relationship? Governance of organizations, as well as law and legislation as it pertains to social and community work. Many people in social work are not actually trained in law, but they do have to administer law for statutory obligations, for example, child welfare law and some aspects of family welfare also. And then in the third semester then, we have a professional field placement. And that is the academic excellence one, where they try to tie everything for the 3 years together into that field placement and reflection reports that they are working on. So learning experiences and building that into the course is a very integral part of professional development that we are concentrating on. Our learning support then for the students through the 3 years are the field manual, Making the Most of Field Placement. Now this is a very excellent manual, and once a student gets it in the first year, they use it throughout all the 3 years. A field placement has a beginning, you plan for it, it has a beginning, it has a middle where work is done, and it has an ending. Once the end, it begins the next placement. So there's this constant planning for a placement, beginning a placement, doing the placement, ending a placement, and then continuing that in the second semester, first year, second year, and third year into graduation. When they finish their final placement, then they are going to be planning for their job or the work that they're going to do afterwards. So they begin, they have to plan, they have to begin that work, and there'll be a middle, and there'll be some kind of ending to whatever that work is. We also then have the DFL print course books, which deal with help the student go through activities, learning activities in the manual. All of our courses now are on Moodle, and that involves then the classmates, their class in that year, and then the coordinators of the field placement at USP. We have extended that now to Web 2 technologies, and I appreciate the comments made yesterday by our keynote speaker, because I'm finding I'm sort of one of those back there ones, but the younger ones are sort of getting us into the Web 2. So now we're doing iPods, Facebook. Our Facebook page has become very popular. We have over nearly 90 members in it now. And in that Facebook page, we have students from all 3 years. So our first years are engaging with third and etc. Even our postgraduate diploma in social policy students are engaging with the students in the Facebook page. We also then have the alumni who are engaging with the students in that. We have people who are doing their MAs in SWs in Perth, for example, and she's very much involved in our Facebook page. She's connecting us to the Perth social work students and the lecturers and professors in Perth that are teaching social work. So our students are getting exposure to other professionals and other educators through that Facebook page. So it's a very dynamic one, and there's been very interesting exchanges of students doing their field placements right at the moment in their second and third year in their areas. We also then have the field placement educators, Those are people who work in the organizations, and they are responsible for the student and the care of the student and the learning of the student in the work environment of that context, specific context that that organization is dealing with. And we also then have our USP field coordinators, the lecturers, or myself and others, who will visit the students and help them from our point of view into the area, or into the work. Now, the USP professional learning outcome, if you recall David's, the 7 institutional learning outcomes, the one that I've been will be looking at, I haven't tested this one yet, so this is the beginning of the test. David had tested one, and I'm supposed to be doing this testing, I think it's probably in the new year, but we're also starting it part of this time. So originally as a STAR trainer, I helped work on this rubric. And then when we went, it was tested by other people, then it went back to our training workshop, whenever it was, just a couple of weeks ago, or last week, I guess. And another group of people who had tested it rewrote it. So now it's coming back to me, and I'm going to be testing it again. So this is the first time, just at that training, that I see the new version of professionalism. And this is, students will demonstrate principles, values, and ethics of academic standards and that of a chosen profession. So that's the statement about professionalism. There are then, as David has pointed out, the criteria have been developed: adherence to academic principles, effective time management, and respect for chosen profession. Again, we have the benchmark, the milestone, and the academic excellence. And we have a progression, attempts to follow academic policies, often follows academic policies, always follows academic policies. Again, this is, the benchmark is for the 100 level, the milestone for the 200 level, and the academics for the 300 level. Assessment activities that we involve our students in throughout the whole period are critical reflective journals. Every student must keep a journal for every course, every year. So there will be 6 journal entries altogether. They will be doing their field work research reports, and they will also be doing volunteer work and professional field placement reflective reports. So those reports particularly are going to be looking at the ethics of academic standards, because we'll be looking at that rubric as we apply it to their writing of those reports. We also then have the posts on Facebook and Moodle discussion forums. The posts on Facebook are more informal, but we can also assess the Moodle discussion forums in a more rigorous way and actually assign an assessment grade or mark to those discussion forums. We have the field educator's reports on professional field placement. The field educator writes a report and discusses it with the student in placement, and then that comes back to us. And there are, of course, face-to-face discussions in field placement with the field educator. We have the co-workers' formal and informal discussions in field placements. That's quite important to students when they are working with colleagues in the organization, and they have at tea time or lunchtime, they're having their discussions about their work and their experience. And that, we find, comes out in their journals quite a bit. And then we have the field placement coordinators' reports and our face-to-face discussions with the USP coordinators. We also deal a lot with annotated bibliographies of social work law and legislation, and particularly getting the students to use our PACLE, the Pacific Legal Information Institute, free online law in the various jurisdictions. And we now have students in most of the Pacific countries on other campuses. So this is a very good resource. The PACLE is a very good resource for them with regard to law. We have the annotated lists and glossaries of organizations. We also have annotated bibliographies of the UN Human Rights Declarations and Conventions. We are beginning to develop e-portfolios for the students. And then we have class and field placement presentations and book and journal reviews. So in all of these types of assessments, we can begin to formulate the criteria to meet the marking assessment for professionalism. Again, just going through the 100 level benchmark, etc., which David has excellently done. And so if we look at the 100 level professionalism, we'll see that, and this is the course that we are going to be trialing, it's adherence to academic practices, effective time management, and respect for chosen professions, and those will be the benchmarks that are in place. So I need to hurry on. I would just like to give you this one example. We are dealing this with journaling, and we are looking at the demonstrate critical self-reflective practice skills in research, volunteer work, and social and community work. And this is the marking criteria that we have established. So this is the marking criteria that we have developed for journaling, and we can gear this to any of the any sort of activity. So when we look at professionalism, time management, or we look at the other areas of the professional one, we can do specific activities which they have to journal. And again, the marking criteria is there for them. I think David has really mentioned most of this about the criteria which we have looked at. So I think we can end there.